Merci. Juste un petit mot, welcome Matt. Et je passerai après la parole à Meriadec. A few years ago, when I looked upon this kind of idea that we have done today with the forum, I found out that Connection US was one of the was the first conference in that field, and we started to work out something about that, and saying that we could do something quite different because it's in France, and you know the French way of doing things, etc. But anyway, welcome. We are happy to have you there because 25 years ago, or 26 years ago, I guess, you started Connection US. So welcome, Matt.
Bon, il a fait le travail pour moi. Merci, Patrick. Et il l'a fait dans son excellent anglais qui n'est pas le mien. Donc, simplement, je vais rappeler Hello, sir. Thank you to be with us this morning. Je vais rappeler simplement en français, vous êtes officier de l'US Air Force. Hein. Vous êtes affecté à son laboratoire de recherche. Et comme l'a dit Patrick, vous avez élaboré et initié en 1993 l'événement dont s'est inspiré ce forum l'année dernière. Patrick le rappelait, le Wargaming Connection. Voilà. Et peut-être une dernière chose pour les gens qui sont des spécialistes, je mentionne que notre invité Matthew Caffrey a publié sous le sceau de l'école de guerre navale américaine un ouvrage qui s'intitule « À propos des jeux de guerre on Wargaming » au Naval War College. Hein. It's up to you for 30 minutes if you want, and thank you so much to be with us this morning. So. Thank you.
Okay. First, I have to, just for formality's sake, start with a disclaimer that these are my views and not necessarily the views of Air Force Research Lab or United States Air Force, or certainly not the U.S. government.
Yes, it's your personal point of view.
And you always have to do that. And the other thing I want to do to start is just to express my personal gratitude. I very much feel a debt to France. For over 300 years, France has been very good to the United States. In the 1800s, Lafayette and Rochambeau and all the folks that came to help us gain our independence. In the 19th century, the gift of the Statue of Liberty. I'm originally from New York City, and I don't remember the first time I saw that beautiful statue. It really helps us to remember who we are and the best of our natures. And then all the times we fought together in the 20th century, the world wars, Korea and Iraq, we have been allies for a very long time. And I personally feel it's a great honor to talk to you people, to be here today, to say thank you, merci. So why am I here? Well, they talked about connections, and you see up there on the big screen that I also did a book on wargaming. And be nice to the guy with the camera. Thank you. And in that game, I went back to the earliest war games I could find, and really the beginning of civilization, and then took it up to the current concepts, current conflicts. About 2/3 of the book is that history, about 1/3 is what that history teaches us. And the biggest lesson to me from really 6,000 years of history is that war games save lives if you war game more effectively than your adversaries. And that's very, very important because whoever our adversaries will be in the future, odds are very high that they war game. One of the last things I did working on the book was I Googled top 25 militaries in the world. Didn't realize there'd be about 8 different lists. Picked the one I thought was right. And then I just took the name of the country and the word war game and put it into a Google search. And I found multiple hits on 24 of the 25 biggest militaries on the planet, strongest militaries. So whoever your future allies will be, whoever your future coalition partners, whoever your future adversaries will be, chances are they war game. So it's not good enough just to war game. You have to war game more effectively than your adversaries. You also have, one of the other things that I learned from the book is that, give me a second, I want to make sure I do everything right.
You have.
That, so how do war games help us save lives? Well, they don't do it by themselves. They have to help us have more effective decisions. And one way we do that is by making our decisions more quickly and making them more effectively. And it's not necessary to make every decision right. You just have to be right more often than your adversary. The way I describe it to people is that war games give our side the card counter's advantage. I was stationed at Nellis while I was still active duty, and I was a member of the local Apple users group. Our users group president was a professional gambler. He was a card counter. And he liked to say that he never knew what his next card was going to be. He just had better odds of being right than the house. And it must be true because he paid cash for his house. So that is the type of advantage that wargaming can give you, not knowing the truth, but maybe guessing right a little bit more often. Another thing that is very important in wargaming is that for centuries, war games have helped us win wars. And that's a wonderful thing to do because it's not only helping us win, it's helping us win faster, with fewer casualties, with less loss of national treasure. But even a victory can come at a horrible cost, and France knows that better than many nations. Can war games help us avoid wars altogether? I think they can help. Not a guarantee, but something that may help us avoid some wars some of the time, and that's a wonderful thing. Doctors cannot cure all diseases, but yet trying is a good thing. I was diagnosed almost exactly a year ago with cancer, and my last 2 scans have shown no evidence of cancer. Doctors, I think, worldwide will never say there is no cancer. They say, we see no evidence. And that's good enough for me. And I know that not all cancers are curable, but I'm kind of glad they cured mine. So if we can even avoid some of the wars that may occur in the future, what a great blessing that would be. And if we fail and we only save some of the lives that people have to fight and make sure they come home and make sure they come home with all their limbs, that is a very great thing too. So in doing that, we really need to learn from each other and really work together to try to move in that direction. I think that is a very noble and a good thing to do. I'm very glad that we have in this audience people who are the practicing military, because they are the ones that are going to have to make sure things happen today and they actually apply the value of wargaming. I'm very glad that we have so many people who are professionals in the field, because it's up to us to keep our war games getting better and more effective, our peace games, our other types of applied wargaming, to help us do our job better and better every year. Because remember, our adversaries are trying to get their war games to be more effective, so we can never get to the point where we can rest. We have to keep getting better and better. And I understand from Patrick about a fourth of the people in the audience are students, and that's going to be your job in fewer years than you realize. Now, I can remember when I went to college, I felt like it was going to take forever. And looking back, it seems so brief since college. You are going to need to learn from the folks that are called hair pigment challenged. and take what we give you and go further. And to have a chance to talk to you now at the beginning of your road to improve wargaming is again a very great honor. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. I want to thank you for all the things that France has done that I personally feel very grateful for. And I want to thank you for all the things we will do together in the future. Merci.
Thank you so much for your kind words with France and alliance with United States of America. I have a question, sir. Do you think, or could you tell us if U.S. Air Force is in advance with using wargamings in comparison with U.S. Navy or U.S. Army?
Yeah,
and if it's yes, why?
well, we live in what's called a joint world, and the way that the U.S. military talks about things, if you have Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines fighting together, then it's joint. If we have our great French allies involved, then it's a combined operation. And nowadays, we do almost nothing that isn't joint. We actually do very little that it's not part of a combined operation with other nations. Well, if war games help you learn how to do things faster, if war games help you learn how to save lives and have fewer casualties, then you need to be doing that in peacetime. You need to be doing that before the fighting starts. So all of our war games involve all of our services. So I'm in the Air Force and I work for our research lab, and we try to figure out not only what's possible, but if this is possible, how much would it help? Because we don't have enough time and money to invent everything that could be invented. So as we do that, it's important that we talk to our Marines, we talk to our Army, talk to our Navy, we involve them with our war games, because it could be the problem we're trying to solve, our Navy has already solved. And so we should be putting our time and effort into things they can't solve. By the same token, we try to do as much wargaming as we can with the British, with the NATO countries, with our other great friends and allies around the world, because sometimes what you don't really even think about, like of course you would do it that way. We've been doing it that way for years. We've never heard about. And once we find out, we're like, yeah, yes, of course, that's the way to do it. And again, you will find that out in a fight, but so much better to find that out before you fight.
Thank you. Il nous reste quelques minutes. On a une dizaine de minutes pour les questions.
Ouais, j'ai une question, enfin une question plutôt une remarque. Nous étions we were in December on an Air Force base, and we were talking about drones and space and different aspects of future wars. And just before, Caroline talked about how the wargaming is important to the easiest way to wargame something that hasn't happened yet. So can you tell us more about that? What are the challenges that specifically the Air Force is facing, and why it is using wargaming?
Okay, well, there's two types of trying to anticipate the future. It's trying to anticipate where we may have to fight. And war games tend to be fairly inexpensive compared to so much else the military does. The very preliminary war games, you may just have a few people in a room, and they may be talking about what might be the political impacts, what might be the economic impacts, and other than the people's time, there is very little technology, very little, really no money involved. And what makes this valuable is it tends to help us understand what are the problems that we should be aware of, and what are the problems that really should be keeping us up at night, that we need to be very sure we have ways to keep them from getting worse and worse and worse. And then, and that's the highest level of wargaming. And then a level below that, there's places where we have understood from the higher war games we need to be paying attention, and then we try to anticipate how might a fight in that area actually develop and what would be important. And one of the reasons why it's so important to anticipate this, during the refreshments before we started, somebody had read my book, and thank you, and he said that he had read about our Admiral Nimitz from the Pacific Theater during World War II, and how he had said that all the challenges they encountered in the Pacific War had been seen in the war games during the interwar period. And people in the Navy very proud of that letter. But it's more important than that, because we anticipated in the 30s that we would have to take islands closer to Japan in order to be strong in Japanese home waters. So our Marine Corps didn't know how to do amphibious operations. Today, it's hard to believe there was ever a time they didn't know how to do that. But then they used war games to help them develop their amphibious doctrine. We determined from those war games we would need to use underway replenishment in order to have the fleet ready to operate close to Japan. And we had to develop the technology to do that. And then there's the wargaming my organization does, and that is we have scientists who are much smarter than I am that look at what might be possible. And they say, well, this radar could see this much further, this missile could go that much further. And then we try to put those into a war game, and we fight out a fight that we think may happen in the future. And in some cases, having the missile go a little bit further, I mean, there aren't any targets that are further. So I guess it's nice, but it really doesn't have much of an impact. And then there's other war games where we say, okay, let's assume we can do this. And it's like, oh, that helps a lot. Yes, that's something we really do need to be working on, that one. And that can also help us on the adversary side too, where we have things that the adversaries may be working on, and we include them in war games, and we're like, okay, well, that's not good, but okay. And then we put something else in a war game, and like, oh, that would be bad. We're going to need to now work on a way to counter that.
It's a current topic. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions? Oui, il y a deux mains qui se lèvent au milieu de la salle, si vous voulez bien passer un micro.
Hello, I'm Bertrand DeCoster from DGA, Procurement Agency. I have a question. As you said that one of the successes of Wargame, you talked about the US Navy in World War II, but how come when people talk about successes of Wargame, it's always about things from like a long time ago? Aren't there more recent successes that people can be proud of?
Oh, yes, and I'm glad you asked that question, because I want to make 2 points. One is, yes, much more recent, and sometimes losing a war game can be more valuable than winning a war game. And so post-World War II, the Chinese played a war game of their intervention in the Korean War and lost. And so they're like, okay, that's not good. We're going to have to come up with a new strategy. And they came up with the strategy they did use in the Korean War. And then more recent than that, in preparation for the invasion of Iraq here early in the century, our Army commanding general did a war game of the invasion and suffered a great many casualties in a very short period of time. And his reaction was, okay, that's not the strategy we're going to follow. Let's come up with a new strategy, war game the new strategy, and see how that turns out. And so our basic battle plan was very, very different from what was originally envisioned. And from what we know now, that was an accurate war game. If we had followed the course we originally thought, it would have, we might have won in the end, but we would have had a great many more people killed. So that's this century. That's pretty recent example.
Thank you. Une autre question? Quelqu'un se levait? Voilà, merci.
Hello, sir. Thank you for sharing your experience with us today. My name is Julien Dryard. I'm consultant in crisis management for PM Risk Change. And my question is that one, what kind of sales game or wargaming you use? It's like board game or software you use? And my second question is, do you collaborate also with, I don't know, businesses or students in general to share your experience as well on that field?
Okay, one of the things that I very much feel strongly about is that the type of war game needs to match what you're trying to do. So there are some people in the field that are like, oh, traditional tabletop board war games, that's the way to go, or oh, computer simulations, that's the future. And maybe they will become more common in the future as we make progress in AI, and that's a whole other discussion. But you really need to know all the different types of war games so that you can try to make sure that you have the best fit. And I've seen so many cases where you have a war game turn out badly, and the sponsor will say, oh, but we used the same software that these guys used, and their war game was a great success. Says, well, it was a good fit for what they were trying to do. It was a bad fit for what you're trying to do. And that's one of the reasons why it is so important to talk to industry and so important to talk to the people who publish popular war games, because the bigger your toolkit, the more likely you are to have just the tool you need for a given use of war games. And that's a big part of Connections. Connections US brings in military, people who do it as a hobby, publishers, people who design war games, some of the people that would do serious wargaming here. And the bigger our tent, the more types of wargaming that comes to our conferences, the more likely we are to find just the type of war game we need for particular applications.
Thank you. Là-haut, s'il vous plaît.
Yes, thank you for your experience and sharing it with us. My name is Guillaume Chaperon. I'm associate professor in statistics. And I have a technical question on how you consider in war games stochastic events or like probabilistic events. When you say that before the invasion of Iraq, you ran a strategy that turned out to be wrong, how do you know that actually that strategy was wrong? Because it was, one outcome, and maybe if you would have run it 100 times that same strategy, you would have found out that 80 times out of 100, it's very good. But because the strategy you mentioned, maybe the only run you had was by bad luck, the worst outcome. So how do you basically simulate with people? Do you repeat 100 times the same war game to generate probability distributions? How do you do that?
That's a very, very good question. And it's going to be very hard to answer briefly, but I will be as brief as I can. There's been a conflict in war games forever, in that if you put it all into a computer, you can run it very, very fast, and so you can run it very many times, and you can see maybe what happened bad this time was the unusual outcome, and it could be better at other times. But the problem with doing that is the people who adjudicate war games are more than just figuring out if this missile hits this, what's the chance of it getting shot down. It's the players say to go over here and do this. How are we going to use our assets to go over here and do this? And if red does something different, blue does something different. So in most of our war games, our adjudicators both, the words we use is competent subordinates, that our players say, go do that, and then the adjudicators figure out exactly how they would do that, and then adjudicate their detailed execution. Well, one of the things that I'm very excited about, and it will be the theme of Connections US this summer at Quantico, Virginia, just a little plug, is if you use artificial intelligence and machine learning to adapt what blue and red does as each game evolves differently, then you can run it over and over and over again and get that distribution of outcomes. But you will also have the blue and the red side fighting in a way that's reasonable. And probably the best example of how not to do that is many years ago we were practicing Korea in case there was a future war, and they wanted to run the software for a long period of time, and so the players went home, had a good night's sleep, came back in the morning, and the game had been moved 30 days, and the North Koreans had pulled back, got on trains, gone over to the other border, got off the trains, lined up, and attacked back. And at the time, Brigadier General, who was in charge of the Air Forces, said, "How long did all this take?" And they said 30 days. Says, "Well, what was the U.S. Air Force doing during that time?" "Oh, you were attacking northwest of Seoul, where the enemy used to be." Says, "Well, we don't take 30 days to change where we attack. We take just a few minutes." So an AI could allow you to adjust what your forces are doing just as fast as things change in the game. And then in the particular case of the war game for Iraq, what inflicted so many casualties was the Saddam Fedayeen, who had doctrine and weapons and training and a whole method of warfare where they would hide in windows in the cities, wait until the convoy was about to leave the city, and then ambush the whole convoy at once. And that was judged to be very effective, so we outflanked all the cities to the west. Well, one of our convoys got lost and went through a city by mistake, and it suffered terrible casualties. And it was because for days these guys were set and ready to attack as soon as we came through. So in 20/20 hindsight, seeing what happened, it does seem accurate that war game did correctly predict that original strategy would have been very costly. But excellent, excellent question, and one we wrestle with all the time. Thank you.
Thank you very, very, very much, sir, for your friendly and experienced words. And I think you will be with us all day long to speak with all the people who want to. Thank you.
Thank you.